Truths and Truths presents Hidden Grief, the Weight Beneath the Smile. Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, it smiles politely, it goes to work every morning, holds meetings, signs contracts, and says, "I'm fine." But grief has a way of waiting, and when it hides too long, it doesn't die. It festers. The man who wouldn't cry. Dan Michaels had perfected the art of pretending. To the world, he was that man, composed, successful, the kind of father everyone admired. After losing his wife, Clara, 8 years ago, people whispered about how strong he'd been. He smiled at the funeral. He held their daughter, Irene, steady on his lap, while others broke down around them. He thanked people for their condolences. He made sure no one saw him crack. "You have to be strong for her," they said. "Don't let her see you cry," they warned, so he didn't. He buried Clara on a cold October morning, then buried his grief right beside her. And from that day forward, Dan never let himself fall apart. He worked harder than ever. Late nights turned into early mornings. He built a company from scratch, kept his house spotless, filled Irene's life with everything money could buy. Designer shoes, summer camps, dance lessons, a car for her 16th birthday. He believed that if he could keep everything under control, no cracks, no chaos, then he would never have to feel the ache that had nearly destroyed him. But grief is patient. The silent house. By the time Irene turned 18, their house felt less like a home and more like a museum. Her mother's photos still hung in the hallway, perfectly aligned. The same perfume bottle sat half-used on the dresser. Every corner of the home smelled faintly of nostalgia and something unspoken. Dan avoided her room entirely. When he passed by, he felt the air shift, heavy, haunted, and his mind filled with the sound of Clara's laughter echoing down the stairs. The way she used to tease him for his color-coded spreadsheets. The way she'd whisper, "Breathe, Dan. Life isn't a checklist." But now life was a checklist. Wake up, work, provide, repeat. He told himself this was love, that keeping busy was protecting his daughter, protecting himself. Yet the cracks began to show in small, quiet ways. He forgot birthdays, snapped over misplaced keys, slept only in short bursts, haunted by flashes of Clara's last day, the car spinning, the call he never got to answer. And Irene noticed. She saw it in the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was watching, the way his eyes lingered on empty chairs, the way he'd changed the subject every time she mentioned her mother. "Dad," she said once softly, "you never talk about her." He stiffened. "Because it doesn't help to look back, Irene. We move forward." But moving forward without ever looking back had cost him more than he realized. The daughter's distance. Irene loved her father deeply, but love built on silence eventually starts to crack. As a teenager, she tried to bridge the gap. She'd cook dinner, hoping he'd sit down and talk. He'd thank her, eat, and then retreat to his office. As she grew older, she stopped trying. By 21, Irene had moved into her own apartment across town. Calls became quick and efficient. "Hi, Dad, I'm fine." "Work good?" "Okay. Love you." And though Dan never said it out loud, every call ended with the same unspoken ache. She's drifting away just like her mother, but he didn't know how to stop it. He'd spent so long mastering the art of control that vulnerability now felt like weakness. So he smiled through the loneliness. He threw himself even deeper into work. And when night fell, he sat in Clara's old chair with a glass of whiskey, staring at the photo on the mantel. The three of them on a beach trip years ago, Irene clinging to her mother's legs, waves crashing behind them. He stared until the whiskey blurred the image, until the ache in his chest grew quiet enough to sleep for a few hours. The collapse. The breaking point didn't arrive in a storm. It came quietly, in the form of chest pain one afternoon at work. He brushed it off as stress, popped an aspirin, kept typing. But when his vision blurred and the floor rushed up to meet him, the illusion of control shattered. When he woke in the hospital, the doctor's voice was calm but grave. "You're lucky, Mr. Michaels. A minor heart attack. But your blood pressure is dangerously high. Your body's been running on adrenaline for years. You need to slow down." Dan nodded, numb. He had no idea how to slow down. Slowing down meant stopping, and stopping meant feeling. When Irene arrived, her eyes red and terrified, he tried to crack a joke. "Guess I finally took a vacation." She didn't laugh. She took his hand, the first time they'd truly held hands in years. "Dad," she whispered, "you're killing yourself trying not to feel." He turned away, throat thick. "You wouldn't understand." "Then help me," she said. "Help me understand." That was the first time something shifted. The therapist's chair. At first, therapy felt like torture. He didn't know what to say. Didn't know where to start. He'd spent so long avoiding emotions that the idea of naming them felt foreign. "Tell me about Clara," the therapist asked. He looked at the window. "She was good, strong, better than me." Silence stretched. "You never allowed yourself to grieve her," the therapist said gently. "Because if I did, who would hold everything together?" he shot back. The words hung in the air, sharp, defensive, and then he realized he'd said together as if everything hadn't already fallen apart. The sessions continued. Week after week, walls he'd spent a decade fortifying began to crack. He talked about the day of the accident, how he'd missed her last call because he was in a meeting, how he still played that voicemail sometimes just to hear her voice say, "Love you, see you tonight." He confessed how angry he was at the driver, at God, at himself. And slowly, painfully, Dan began to cry. At first, quietly, then uncontrollably, tears he hadn't shed in 8 years. It didn't feel weak. It felt like breathing again. The daughter's healing, too. Irene saw the change before he said a word. He called her one evening, voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "I went to therapy today." She froze, tears welling. "You did?" "Yeah, it's harder than I thought. But it's time." Weeks later, he invited her over. The house felt different, brighter somehow. There were fresh flowers on the table, lilies, Clara's favorite. The photo on the mantel had been moved to the living room wall, framed, not hidden. Over dinner, he looked at her, really looked. "I spent so long pretending to be strong that I forgot how to be real," he admitted. "You deserved a father who could talk about the hard stuff." Irene reached across the table. "I just wanted you, Dad, not the version who never cries." And in that small, tearful exchange, years of distance melted away. Their conversations deepened. They shared memories of Clara, funny, painful, beautiful ones. Sometimes they cried, sometimes they laughed until their sides hurt. And for the first time since that October morning years ago, the house didn't echo with silence. It pulsed with life again. The letter. A year later, Dan sat at his desk. Not for work this time, but to write a letter. It wasn't to a client, it wasn't even to Irene, it was to Clara. "My love, I thought I was honoring you by staying strong, but I realize now I was hiding from you, from what we had, from what we lost. Grief was my shadow. I kept running from it, but it followed anyway. Thank you for loving me enough to teach me how to live, even after you were gone. I finally told Irene about the night you died. I told her how afraid I was, and she didn't see me as weak. She just saw me. I think that's what healing feels like. I'll never stop missing you, but I'm learning that missing you doesn't have to mean I stop living. With love, always, Dan." He folded the letter carefully, placed it in Clara's old recipe box, and exhaled. For once, it didn't hurt to remember. It felt like release. Months later, Dan and Irene visited Clara's grave together. The sky was golden with sunset. Irene knelt, tracing her mother's name with trembling fingers. "You'd be proud of him," she whispered, smiling through tears. "I think she already is," Dan said softly. They stood there for a long while, hands intertwined, the silence now gentle, not heavy. Then Dan turned toward his daughter. You know, he said, for years I thought grief was something to survive. But it's not. It's something to live through. She nodded. And you did. He smiled. We did. Closing monologue, the hidden truth. Grief doesn't vanish when ignored. It waits in the corners of laughter, in sleepless nights, in the heart that keeps pretending it's fine. Hidden grief is the kind that eats away at you quietly, turning love into distance and memory into pain. But when you finally face it, when you speak the names you've been afraid to say, when you let the tears fall without shame, grief becomes something else. It becomes proof that love still lives. And maybe healing isn't about forgetting who we lost, but remembering who we are because of them, twists and truths. Moral grief unspoken becomes a prison. Grief expressed becomes a bridge. Don't hide your pain to seem strong. Strength is found in the courage to feel, to cry, to heal.